Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. My guest on One of a Kind is Ginger Nowak, the extraordinary volunteer with a willing and generous heart. Giving back to many and varied causes is one of the themes of Ginger's life. Here are just a few of the organizations and community services that bear her imprint. The University of Iowa Hospital School for Special Needs, tutor in the after-school program at Mark Twain, volunteer in the public schools in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, Hancher Showcase, domestic violence program, and hospice. Hospice as an office coordinator, fundraiser, board member, recruiter of volunteers, the Amanda the Panda program, more about that later, and the facilitator for the hospice program called Kids Understanding Loss. In the early days of the hospice program, a nurse described Ginger's involvement as the glue that held us all together and that the grease that kept things running smoothly, end quote. And in the words of Sarah Neary, the hospice volunteer program coordinator, Ginger was and is Iowa City Hospice.
Oh, dear.
And if that isn't enough, Ginger Nowak works at ACT scoring essays about 30 hours a week. She and her husband Art raised 4 children in Iowa City: Andrew, Elizabeth, Karen, and Laura. Welcome to One of a Kind.
Thank you.
Your story begins in Cleveland, Ohio in 1939 when you were born.
Yes.
I want to know about your first family and their influence on you.
Well, my father was regional manager for the steel company in Cleveland and on the road traveling all the time. So mother was the sergeant at arms at home, but a very loving one. Mm-hmm. And we were a busy household. By the time I was in 8th grade, we had 7 children in the family, with an 8th one on the way about 2 months later. And Mom was always so busy, and I was very available, so I wound up in the mothering role for 2 of my youngest siblings. And I can remember even before that, we always had 3 babies: the littlest, the middle one, and the oldest. And so it was mine and my sister Terry's chore to fold diapers when they came in from the diaper service that Mom had for over 30 years. And so a big bouquet of roses arrived when we had to leave Cleveland. Mom was sick for a short time, actually 3 months one summer, and so I was in charge of fixing. I was 10 years old. I had to fix her special diet as well as take care of the youngest child. And then the help we had in the kitchen did the rest of the meals and all. So, you know, I had the title Little Mother all the time, and I just couldn't avoid it. But it was fun, and we had a good time. It was interesting when the youngest was born and joined us in Pittsburgh, and that's another story because
you moved from Cleveland
to Pittsburgh, and that summer or fall I started high school. Mom was so exhausted after moving and left the baby because she was a preemie in the Cleveland incubator for 3 months, and then we brought her to Pittsburgh, and my father decided the crib was going to go in my room. I would get up for the night feeding so Mom could sleep through.
Now I know the genesis of your taking care of other people.
I've just always been in charge with kids, and I loved it. It just came naturally. It was comfortable. I didn't care. And
a theme of your life, Ginger, for sure.
Yeah, and it always has been. And not a problem where my other sisters, they were off running in different directions. I was just there. If Mom needed help, I was there.
Your mother has had a great influence on you, I read in the research, and she was, in the Catholic Church, was a big part of your growing up and a big part of her life.
That's right.
And what was this underground Catholic church? I've never.
Oh, that was very interesting. This was well into her after her retirement. You know, she was in she about mid-70s when she left Iowa City after many different housing situations. She went to Florida to retire in Vero Beach, and got very disenchanted with the traditional Catholic Church because so many of my brothers and sisters were not attending Mass.
Okay.
She needed something to blame it on. And so at that very time, this effort of the underground church, quote unquote, had Monsignor Lefebvre from France as their bishop or their leader, and trained French priests that came over to this country. She discovered them in Florida and would attend Mass at somebody's home at 11 o'clock at night because it was so not acceptable to do this. Then when I heard she was picketing outside Catholic churches in Florida, handing out leaflets telling people they're not at the right Catholic church. You know, you need to go back to Latin. And they did not accept anything after the Council of Trent, 1521. So anything of the changes of the Catholic Church that happened since 1521 were the work of the devil. Just put it bare bones, there it is. So it was very interesting, and she got disenchanted with Florida because she was always a busy person, and she thought she had this condo, she had 8 children, they'd all come down every other month and visit her. Well, you know, lives just don't allow that.
Right.
So she packed up and followed this traditional group out to St. Mary's, Kansas, between Manhattan and
she's
Topeka.
now in her, excuse me, in
She's
her
in
70s?
her late 70s.
My goodness.
Yes,
This
and
woman.
she, they had bought a defunct monastery in the middle of nowhere that had been destroyed by the local Indians because they claimed it was built on their burial grounds. So this group bought and used what they could. Mother went out there and she taught high school and eventually college French for only in exchange for residency. She had a dorm room with the rest of the kids and then moved into a larger apartment that they used for visiting dignitaries, and then Mom was put back in the dorm room. So they used her very nicely.
Well, it sounds like this woman, your mother, had a great influence on you and many of your choices you have made since this time.
But I'm still a very traditional Catholic. There's only one of my siblings that went with the Tridentine group.
I see.
Yeah.
So what did you want to do when you graduated from high school? What?
I really wanted to join the Ice Capades because I went ice skating every day before high school. The rink in Pittsburgh was right next door to my high school. It was an old streetcar barn. And then when they got the monies and built the huge rink downtown Pittsburgh, that's when I had to stop skating. But by then, I really wanted to join the Ice Capades. I thought that was good enough. My father said, no, maybe after college, but go get your education first. So I did. And what did I go into but education?
Education.
Elementary, and specializing back then in late 60s. It was just a certification in special ed. And I did that training for a couple of summers at a special ed school. So it wasn't any degree that I got, but I sure knew that that's where I wanted to be.
And you met your husband, Art.
And while I was in college, I was a sophomore, and he was a sophomore from in dental school at that time. And his fraternity house that he lived in was 2 blocks away. And a mutual friend introduced us. And the rest is history.
You got married, and then he brought you to Iowa City. We're so glad he did.
Well, yeah, we eventually did. We went into the Navy for 3 years. All 4 of my children were born in different states. One in Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and in Pennsylvania. Then in '73, we landed here. He tried a private practice, teaching, and residence at a hospital in Pittsburgh, and we never saw him. So we decided if he'd just get into a teaching program at a university, it would be better for the family. So that's when we came to Iowa.
And your 4 children, you have a son and 3 daughters. And briefly, just tell me, where are they?
Yes, our son with his family is in Denver. And now our daughter, who had been at Duke Medical Center for 23 years, just found a new job and is in Denver too. So we have 2 of them in Denver. My daughter Karen, the middle daughter, is in Houston, Texas, with her 2 boys, and our youngest daughter Lara is in Seattle with our youngest grandson.
All right, now I want to move your story to all the organizations and service organizations that you have decided to contribute your time and energy.
Okay.
When you moved to Iowa City and your children, eventually were gone out of the nest, as they say, where did you start with your...
Well, when we were in Iowa City, I had 3 of them in grade school and 1 at kinder farm. And so I was a parent volunteer, coordinating parent volunteers in 3 different schools all through those years. As well as I had the 3 girls all in swim club in different age groups.
And excuse me, I heard that you were even for the state, the stroke and turn judge.
I trained to be a stroke and turn judge, but I ran 2 state meets with the help of Mary Ann Collison and Dee Vanderhoff at my elbow. That was the only reason they were able to talk me into it.
Oh my,
but I was very involved
I'm
with swimming.
With that.
Our whole summers were swim club.
Right.
Yeah. And then, let's see, we had 2 go to Iowa, 2 to Iowa State. Then eventually Andy finished his PhD program here at Iowa. The 2 oldest girls came back and got their MBAs at Iowa. And our youngest finished at Iowa State after 2 years and went to the Art Institute in Chicago. That was 1990. Now, they all left for their ideal jobs, and Laura with more schooling. Art and I were empty nesters.
And you looked
So I started, well, I was by then, when Laura was in high school and very independent, driving and what have you, I was substitute teaching a lot. And I did that for a number of years until the newspaper article had, shall we have a hospice in Iowa City? So even though I wasn't a nurse or nurse type or anything, I decided I could probably help. I watched my sister Betsy in Washington, D.C. start and instigate a hospice in that area, in the Chevy Chase area, and knew what it was all about. And she'd come out to Muscatine, Iowa for some workshops and what have you. I go down and meet her and sit in on them. So when this effort was started by Martha Luberoff and Mary Child, I attended the meetings for a couple of years, and I thought, okay, they're going to need somebody to organize things. So that's when I jumped on board, and I helped fundraise for 3 years and got on the board and was a volunteer still, substitute teaching in special ed classes around the district, and then decided I was getting too old for that. I couldn't pick up the teenage kids and change diapers, and that kind of thing. I thought.
The teenage kids?
Yeah, the very special ed kids, cerebral palsy and what have you, that just needed that kind of attention in the special classrooms. So I let go of that and got more and more involved with hospice. And we had our first patient in 1983, a family patient, and then by early 85, we realized it was growing so fast they needed someone to coordinate the office. So
and that's what
I volunteered.
You did that.
So I did that. So I was on salary for 10 years, from 85 to 95, coordinating the office, helping with the training of volunteers and doing all that kind of stuff. And I was, Martha and I and our social worker at that time, Joy Suter, got the kids' grief support group going.
Yeah, tell me about the support group.
Yeah, it's for kids that are grieving the loss of parent, grandparent, sibling, significant friend, or whatever, but the loss needed to be in death.
Do they meet at a certain place, or do you go to their homes?
No, we would have them gather. We were in a house that that Iowa Mercy Hospital gave us down the block from the hospital, an old home, and we had the group meet in the evenings for an hour. And sometimes there were 3 kids that showed up, sometimes there were 14 kids. It all depended what was going on in the community, like when we had the shootings over there in 91, and so many kids were impacted by losing their parent or what have you. And
is it still going on?
It's still going on, yes. It's had many different directors, and I just continued to volunteer when they need me. It's great to let others in the community and other trained volunteers try their hand and be a support person and a facilitator in that group. So I back off when I can, and then I just fill in when they need another pair of hands.
And it's called Kids Understanding Loss.
Cool group. And then there's the role group, are the teenagers.
Okay.
The first group is 6 to 10, the other from 11 to 16, I believe, the teenagers.
And then another part of your hospice story is Amanda the Panda.
Well, let me straighten you out on that,
Okay.
because it was while I was involved with hospice that I met Joanne Zimmerman, not the politician from Des Moines, but another Joanne Zimmerman who had this program, had just started in Des Moines area, and it was Amanda the Panda, the bear with the big red heart, to visit or to support kids at cancer camps. She had a camp program that would meet just once in the summer, and it has grown from that. It's its own entity, but it spoke to my heart so much because it was going to deal with kids.
Sure.
So I volunteered to go through her training, and she would fly me from Iowa City to Des Moines and for many, many weeks and go through her training. And then I'd wear the bear suit and visit children at home, in the hospital, before they banned that, because it really wasn't too clean,
I was
as you
going
could
to say
say.
hygienic. Let's see, fur on the Amanda the Panda.
I know. Well, they'd come up and hug me
Sure.
and all. And then I was at camp. I'd be a camp counselor, and then when they needed Amanda to show up, I did, or one of the other counselors would get in the suit. But it's a very heartwarming effort and it made such a difference to the kids, you know, just to feel and pet the fur and get a hug. And I'd sit in the hospital and play card games with them so parents could go out and have a meal or something like that. There were some times when I go in the room and one little girl just freaked out. She was on the ceiling. I was just too big and too overwhelming, so I had to make a U-turn and get out of there fast.
But it's not under the hospice then?
No,
Okay.
it's not.
All
It
right.
is just one of the programs that Iowa City Hospice has a brochure about, because now it has evolved to bereavement camps.
Okay.
Because the other group in Iowa, I'm spacing it off, does focus on camps for kids and their siblings. Now Joanne's group just does bereavement camps in the spring, summer, and fall. And I've been a volunteer, but not wearing the suit because it's way too warm. When you start changing lifestyles and everything, you just cannot breathe in that suit. So I just gave up wearing the suit and was a volunteer at the camps.
The other thing you've been involved in with domestic violence,
Yes, I trained as a volunteer for that program and have done many things, coordinating their donation closet and bringing donations in, and would help with kids when they're in the program. Just show up and either bake cookies in the kitchen or go down and read stories to them in the game room. And now I'm more of a support financially and getting them things that they need, backpacks for the kids that come in with nothing to start schools.
Sure.
And I had a dear friend that died and left me a wad of money that I put in the bank, and I'm using it because she spent so many years of her life in bed as an invalid, dealing with so many illnesses. So I decided, once, I don't know, I just had this image that kids that wind up in the domestic violence shelter are not there of their own free will. They have to follow their parent in there. And so it's very trying, it's very difficult. Lots of people struggling and working hard to make it work with so many strangers around them and all. So I give this money to the Kids Sleep Safely program. So every kid that comes in now gets their own pajamas, their own bedding, pillow, things like that they can take with them when they leave the shelter. So it's something brand new and not used and not shared, towels, whatever the donation can cover in those ways. And I feel really pleased about that.
And what is it called again
Kids,
for people who maybe would like to contribute?
It's Kids Sleep Safely program.
That's
one of the, and I just thought that was so neat. And I know Karen, my friend, would be laughing and smiling. Knowing that these kids are doing it, because she was a pediatric nurse practitioner and she loved kids too.
That's great.
Yeah, so
that's wonderful.
That's my help with domestic violence now.
Violence.
Yeah.
And then you had this part of your story is that you heard about how the things were in such disarray in New Orleans after Katrina.
Oh, yes.
How did you happen to know what organization to hook up with to go down there to volunteer?
Very cool. Our RSVP program here under Joan Cook.
Joan Cook,
yes.
She's great.
I was talking with her in one of the classrooms where I was volunteering, and I said, oh, Joan, they have all these kids moving into the schools down in Houston. I said, I know they could use help. How can I get down there? She said, I'll call the RSVP chairman down there. The rest was history. She found me the school. I wanted a school that had the most kids in it, and this particular school had at least half the kids in the elementary grades were from Katrina. And they arrived with no documentation, just a parent or whoever in charge saying he belongs in first grade. And I have a daughter, Karen was in Houston, and her in-laws lived in downtown Houston, and I knew they had a garage apartment. So I called them and asked, could I hang out in the garage apartment for about 6 weeks while I volunteer in this school. So that worked out beautifully.
Oh, perfect.
Did that, and
you just assisted the teachers.
I was just an assistant, and you know, when she had her reading groups, I was helping small groups and just managing the classroom, and really sometimes just rocking some of the kids who would just break down in tears because the pressure of fitting in, losing their property, lost pets, lost family members in a strange town. They had so many issues they were dealing with.
And then you went back.
Well, I did. The teachers were so grateful. They said, come back, and you can stay with me. This one teacher was an empty nester, so I came back and stayed in her daughter's room and continued to volunteer in the same two classrooms. So I was there 6 weeks in the fall and another 6 weeks in the spring.
Lucky kids, lucky kids.
Well, it was my pleasure to do that because you just knew how everybody needed help. The teachers needed help.
See, your education, your college degree is.
Oh, I know.
Look at how
forever
that's touched
and ever
all these
going.
areas.
Yeah.
I know in the mid 2000s you kind of stopped volunteering because your mother was diagnosed with dementia then moved back, and you became her caregiver?
Well, yes. She was living in St. Mary's, Kansas, but she was definitely losing a lot of perceptions. Couldn't remember what she did 5 minutes ago or ate 5 minutes ago. And she had remarried after being 26 years a widow. Then when he died, she could not be left alone, but she wasn't ready for a care center either. And I was empty nester, and Art was pleased to say, sure. We had this big home with 4 bedrooms, and everything we did on the first floor, she wouldn't have to do stairs. So I brought her, and she lived with us for 4 years.
For 4 years.
Yeah, and she was very pleasant. And again, only in Iowa City could I have done that. I mean, I had
lots
the home
of resources.
Was open, lots of resources. Pathways was just amazing because I was working full time at hospice that time. So Mom went to Pathways.
And now you're, they told me, the research, that now you're turning around and helping people who are dealing, family members with dementia.
Yes.
And you have a little toolkit. You come in with a stool, and what else do you?
Well, that's one of the programs that volunteers can sign up to be trained as. To help with families with dementia, to be there with the patient, to help the family, and we do have a toolkit that we can take, and depending on the level of involvement, sometimes I'm always knitting for hospice prayer shawls as well, and I have that knitting with me, and that seems to be the tactile thing that they mostly gravitate towards. I'll pull out my knitting, and it's very soft yarn and all, and I'll give them a ball of that yarn, and they will enjoy that.
And you can knit while
I can knit while we're visiting, yeah. And lots of times it's just a matter of putting comfortable music on. Sometimes those one would enjoy being read to. One person just
massage of the hand.
Hand massage, and I do Reiki and little things like that. It just makes it comfortable for someone who just can't really figure out why am I here. You know.
Now, in your story, you have this family that gets together, I read, in July to celebrate Christmas. That's because right. I know it's
we're all scattered
all over, and you gather. And you have, I think people would be surprised, you love to be on the edge. You have this kind of adventuresome spirit. You're maybe it has
skydiving.
Skydiving. Share some of the things that you didn't tell your husband till afterwards.
I didn't. I did not want him to worry. Number one. Number two, try and talk me out of it.
You're right.
But my good friend that I met in hospice. Always was intrigued with skydiving ever since World War I movies where she saw people jumping out of planes. So the two of us decided this needed to be on the top of our bucket list.
Did you hold hands when you?
No, we went separately.
Oh, you went separately.
And you jump in a very safe way. You have a 175-pound man strapped on your back.
Oh, okay.
You know, and you jump out and you have a cameraman in your face and you're supposed to go like this and have the wind blowing in you and you just sail right down. It's quite wonderful.
And you did something with your grandchild. You did.
We went down the bobsled run at the Olympic Village.
And that going how fast?
Oh, how fast? I don't know, but I guess we went down a mile run in 40 seconds or something like that. Yeah, my granddaughter Sarah and I did that together, and we beat the other two families that went down. So we were on the number one on the podium.
I suppose zip lining is next.
Now, yes, I haven't done that yet. I'm saving that for Sharon, so we can do it together. I'd like to do some hand gliding.
It's all in the air. Is this
I like
something that
you know, until recently, when people said, if you really believe there's another life, what would you like to come back as? And I always thought a bird. You're so free. And, you know, to fly unencumbered, and yet I have a part of me that hates to be in an airplane. Just for the claustrophobic being under control, but I'm thinking you're flying in the air and you've got these parachutes. I've done some, you know, trailing behind a boat with a parachute over me, done that. But now I'm not so sure I want to come back as a bird.
Oh, okay. You've changed your mind.
I'm realizing that I can do bird-like things and come back a little differently if that, in fact, is part of the routine.
It's evolving.
It's evolving, that's
right.
So
do you have time for any other thing besides all the other things you do? Do you like to travel? Or?
Oh, we do. Do a lot of traveling. What's been fun about our Christmas in July, Art and I rent the house somewhere on a body of water, and we go to a different place every time.
Oh, good.
And we just had our 13th year doing this. Our youngest was a year old, our youngest grandchild, and he just turned 13 this past summer. So we've been all around the States doing that on lakes and the ocean and what have you. On my bucket list that might be working its way up to the top is I want to tour Italy on a Vespa.
Oh.
And so I have to learn first how to ride a Vespa here, and so I'm going to rent one in Iowa City.
Good.
So if you see me going around parking lots,
wear a helmet.
I'll wear my helmets. Yeah, but I just think that would be a whole lot of fun. My husband's not quite sure about that.
Well, but I hope you get that.
I'll get there eventually.
I think so. My last question is, what are your one or two favorite things about living in Iowa City or in our community?
In the community, that offers so many opportunities. I love it, and I always gravitate towards things that involve children. I love being a reading tutor in the schools, and just helping any way I can. And now with Art and I retiring and being in the retirement mode, we can support a lot of the organizations that are really worthy in this community. So we have fun doing that, going to the fundraisers and helping all of them keep going. I mean, one of my most favorite things is to watch a good movie, and I am so excited about film team coming to the community.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
I'm glad you put in a plug.
Oh, yes.
I guess it isn't my last question. I cannot finish this interview without telling the viewers that last May, your sister
Mary,
Mary went through chemo, and she
Yes.
lost all her hair, and you, to support her, shaved all of yours out. I'm
Yes.
sure that meant a lot to her.
It was very, very special to her. I organized all 6 of my other sisters. We included a sister-in-law that we adopted as a sister. So there were 7 of us that went down after her first round of chemo and surprised her, came dancing in with all these strange hats on to Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and had a wonderful afternoon with her.
Did they all shave their heads
No,
too?
I was the only one. I
okay.
said, no pressure there, ladies. So they all decided they'd wear a hat that they could leave behind.
Perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
it was very special.
Thank you for sharing your story.
You're
and that was
welcome.
a wonderful way to end it. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Ginger.
You're welcome.
My guest on One of a Kind has been Ginger Nowak, wife, mother, grandmother, sister, tutor, ACT employee, and a most amazing volunteer. She has indeed made a difference in the young and not so young. I think Ginger's story is one of helping others. Words used to describe my guest are generous, smart, caring, organized, humble, and adventuresome. Ginger Nowak is one of a kind.